afternoon and welcome to another Mumbrella Hangout. This is the third Creative Review Hangout for those of you who have been keeping up. And today I'm joined in the studio by Hamish, who is from the With Collective. He's their creative director. And coming down the line from via video link is Chris Jeffares from Cummins and Partners. So just a little bit about both of our guests. Hamish joined With Collective in March last year. Is that correct?
No, January this year.
Oh, January this year.
Yeah.
My apologies on that one. I was taking that off your LinkedIn profile. Maybe I must have got my dates muddled up. But you've also worked at BMF, DDB and Clemenger BBDO, where were you most recently?
Out of those, none of them. I was actually most recently Naked.
Oh, excellent. Excellent. And so Chris he has been with Cummins and Partners in Melbourne since 2011. It was previously known as Cummins Ross, and so he was originally managing director and partner, and then was made CEO in December last year. He's also worked at Wonderman as the general manager for 10 years previously. So thank you both for joining us. I really appreciate it. So today we're actually going to be looking at how technology can be used by brands and the way it can be leveraged in campaigns. So it's a little bit of a different take from our usual chat around some of the ads that have come out. And so we have a collection of campaigns that we're going to talk about. And I thought it would be great to chat about the first three sort of lumped all together because they're a bit similar in the fact that they've all created some kind of product that they're using to get people to talk about their brands. So the ones we're talking about, they're two from Clemenger BBDO Sydney and one from GPY&R Brisbane, which is actually a surprise addition to today's lineup. I ambushed the guys earlier today and said I want to chat about this one too, so make sure you're up to date. So thanks for being so organised with that one. So the first one is Clem's Whiskers Cats to Cam campaign, and it's a personal favourite of mine. It's a bit of a cat fan, and it saw the agency build an Instagram-enabled camera which could be clipped to a cat's collar and automatically take photos and post them to an Instagram account, allowing their owners to see what their cats are doing during the day, which is probably sleeping. And the second was also from Clem's, and it's the Domio Pepper Hacker, which saw the team hack a pepper grinder and turn it into a device that powered down Wi-Fi and shut off computers and iPads and smartphones in order to bring a family around the dinner table and have no distractions so you can bond and chat about your day. And the third piece from GPY&R was for Earth Hour, which is a normal brand associated with that agency. There was project work and it was a little bit less techie, but they still produced something specific. So the agency produced a climate change inspired beer aimed at highlighting the impact of climate change on farming. So they used drought affected ingredients to produce what I'm told is a poorly tasting beer that they launched at a tasting event at an Earth Hour event, which was at the end of March. So that's the three campaigns we're going to just chat about first. And they've all created a product, and I was just but none of them are actually available to the public. So with these campaigns, if the product's not going to be available to the wider public, as is the case in all three, what's the actual point to them? Chris, I thought I'd throw to you for this one first.
I think probably you hit on it right at the very beginning where you said, often our role is having people actually talk about brands and our brands and our clients' brands. And I think, each of those examples, and there's a number of kind of others, they build a major kind of currency in a conversation. They're using technology and products to actually do it. Whether they're not actually trying to sell those products or not, I don't know whether it's really the objective. It's more about shifting consideration or eventually driving sales from a brand point of view.
Hamish, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think you'd probably class all those pieces as branded content. And certainly if you look at the amount of YouTube hits they've all got, they're all sort of racking up some big numbers. So while it'd be great if the client would pony up the cash to put two of them into production at least, I don't really want to drink the beer, but that may or may not happen, but I think it does get people talking about the brand and create some engagement and brand love, I guess, which hopefully may or may not translate to sales, but it's a piece of branded content, and in the same way that we used to make TVCs, we're now making YouTube clip which features a product such that the agency's created, I guess.
So I guess you sort of mentioned it then, it's more about being a branded content than an actual sort of traditional ad campaign. Some have sort of said it's more about a PR for the brand, and there's been other more negative suggestions on some of our comment threads about these campaigns that have suggested it's just scam to win some medal for the agencies involved. Do you think there is a risk of these campaigns falling into that bucket?
I don't. If you like, to me, the definition of scam is something that isn't seen by the wider public. And you know, back in the day, you could attribute a lot of print campaigns in that bucket where, you know, they're purely seen by jurors. Whereas, you know, I don't think, you know, even 500,000 YouTube hits would suggest that they're not scam, and they're clearly, while they may be proactive, I certainly wouldn't classify them as being scam.
And Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, I think you know, there's always a danger when you're around kind of awards season and April Fools that you're going to kind of fall into one of those camps. I think you know, the Whiskers campaign's got a hashtag of cats to cam, which, you know, is a pretty brave kind of place to go considering it's got scam actually written in the hashtag. But you know, I think if you actually kind of have a look at a lot of them, they're generating noise that they couldn't necessarily buy their way to, you know, from a views and, you know, whether it's PR or not, I think a lot of it is just modern advertising. You know, there's different techniques, there's different channels, you know, the fundamentals are still the same about, you know, preference for brand. And at some point, I'm sure all the clients, and a number of them are quoted in the press releases or whatever else, are actually, you know, trying to drive, you know, short-term, medium-term, long-term sales.
So these three products are probably never going to turn up in the shops. You're not going to be able to buy a pepper hacker down the street. And as much as I would love to get a cats to cam, I'm probably not going to get one.
I would love one of those. I've got a neighbour who is accusing our cat of taking a dump in her lawn every morning, and I can prove that he's not if I had one of those on this collar. But,
there you go, Clemendra. I think you need to send one out to Hamish.
Yeah, thanks, boys.
But do you think that agencies should perhaps be more focused on bringing real products to market rather than the sort of things that are a little bit more gimmicky?
Look, that may well be what happens eventually. I think it comes down to money and commercial realities of actually bringing a product to market, and agencies, you know, while they can come up with ideas and execution, they don't have the funds to do that. So I think we have to put that back on the client. If, you know, I did read some of the comment threads on YouTube and Umbrella, and a lot of people said, where can I get one of those? You know? And so I think, you know, there would be demand, but it's whether it's commercially viable. It's the question, as always.
Chris, what do you think?
I think that a lot of it relates to the engagement you actually have with your clients. I mean, we're working on some projects with some of our clients kind of confidentially that are looking at both local and global rollout of innovative new product lines that in theory should drive millions of dollars worth of sales. And I think if you have the right sort of engagement with your client, that's great. I think the alternative to that is often agencies are engaged to work on communications, and you know, the objectives of that relationship is more about comms and shifting, you know, brand consideration and sales of current products. But, you know, I think different agencies have different relationships with the client. I do think that one of the greater challenges of all of it is skills. You know, we always talk a lot about skills in this industry. You know, we're seeing challenges where, you know, creative people don't know a lot about media. We've got media people who don't know a lot about creative. There's a lot of people who don't know much about digital. How to develop a product and bring it to a commercial reality is a unique kind of skill set as well. And I think those sorts of skills are what we'll see more of joining the industry.
Excellent. So putting all those points aside, what's the overall impact of these campaigns for a brand? How do is it long lasting, or is it sort of just as a splash in the ocean? Hamish?
I think it's probably a spike. You know, you'll see these ideas shared in a news feed over, you know, it'll come up probably 3 or 4 times over 2 weeks, and then you won't see it again. So that's the short-term effect, I guess. But you know, hopefully the longer-term effect is next time a consumer's at shelf, they have some brand affinity or salience towards that brand, and you know, that'll affect their purchase decision.
Chris, what are your thoughts?
I think if you actually kind of look at them, and I'm not sure, if there's a phase 2, phase 3 or phase 4, but I think some of the ideas have great opportunity for extension. I mean, if you look at the whiskers one, for an example, if that can take off globally, and it's certainly generating a fair amount of noise around the place, they could be onto the next kind of Grumpy Cat. If they have some success, maybe they'll end up, putting it on Grumpy Cat, and that as a vehicle, if they can achieve that in a branded way, that's been around for kind of a number of years now. So I think there's opportunity for extension, but I mean, if you just kind of take something, drop it into market and walk away from it, then there's no chance of that longevity. But I don't necessarily know what the intention is, but some of these have that extension opportunity, I think.
So do you think, Chris, that the brand should try and follow up these sort of stunty videos with something a little bit longer? Are you talking about sort of more ads featuring what they're talking about, either sort of outdoor or in print, or are you hoping that they continue it on sort of through more TVCs?
Well, certainly what's been shared, I don't really see any of them as TVCs. I think that there's something quite different. And if for example, using whiskers, if a particular cat generates particularly good for photographs or whatever it might be, then there's lots of opportunities. You can see, maybe a cat from some celebrity in Sydney winning a Canon photo competition or something like that. But I think you can start to bring personalities to life, and there's longer opportunities, and it becomes more of an ongoing kind of program or platform for content around the brand.
Excellent. So I like to get the people involved in these hangouts to give each of the ads, a rating out of 10. So on the 3 campaigns, Hamish and Chris, what would you give them out of 10?
What are we basing that score on? Is it personal?
It's all. I think it's very objective. It's what you think how it's been executed, what you think of the insight that might be.
Okay, so running through, I like the insight. The insight for Catstagram is pretty strong. I think you look at a cat and wonder what he gets up to all day, because he's not, half the time he's out roaming the neighbourhood. For me, I'd love to see it more or rolled out in limited numbers to the public, because I actually went to the Instagram feed and had a look at the photos, and it's only interesting if it's your cat. Like if you can see those photos and recognise various neighbours' backyards or rooms in your house, it's interesting. So cat lovers, I can see that resonating with them, but when you're looking at photos of other people's cats, it's not that interesting. So the next stage of engagement isn't that strong.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd give that a 7 out of 10.
Not bad. Chris, what would you give the Cats to Can campaign?
I think that's right on brand, and I think there's a great opportunity in to kind of take that further. Like I'd give it 7.5. I probably disagree with Hamish a little bit. I actually think that based on what someone else's cat does, you might end up with some pretty famous cats out of all of this, as they're kind of showcasing whether they're breaking the law or hopping next door. They could be sitting at home binging on Game of Thrones at the moment. But I think there's a lot of opportunity. I give that about a 7.5.
And Chris, what about the Dolmio one?
The Dolmio one I think comes from an interesting kind of insight about bringing the family together at dinner time. I think it's a little bit interesting that they're using technology to remove technology. Like Paul Nagy at Clem's, I've got 3 girls as well, and it's a definite reality. I probably don't feel it has the same sort of extension from an ongoing kind of campaign point of view as well. I'd probably give that a 7.
Hamish?
I'm the same. I would love to have that at my place, mainly for my wife, because we could actually have a conversation over dinner. But I think it's a response to, I think, an agency that is working with a creative campaign or global creative platform that may be ongoing. It's puppets, animated puppets, so there's not a great deal you can do with that if that's what you're stuck with. Mm-hmm. So they're trying to find another way of expressing that brand pillar of bringing families together over dinner. yeah, I do agree with Chris, and maybe the extension avenues are probably a bit more limited. But, you know, it's got 2 million views on YouTube.
Got picked up in Norway. We got contacted by
That's right, yeah.
people in Norway about it. So it's obviously had some global impact.
Yeah, so look, for that reason alone, I think I almost prefer that to the cat idea, just because it's getting more reach and possibly resonating with the wider audience. So I'd give it a solid 8.5.
That's pretty good. But you did say you wouldn't buy the climate change beer. So what do you think of that one?
Yeah, that was a bit of a weird one for me. Like I like the approach of taking a less serious angle on climate change. Then when I watched the case study video, it was like, you know, when they're discussing how bad beer might taste, it was very serious music. And, you know, I've seen Interstellar. I know that if the worst happens, we're not really worried about a beer not tasting good. And so for me, it just struck a weird tone of serious but humour. I kind of, and then I went online to sort of see what was next, and there was nothing I could really do apart from sign up for a WWF newsletter. So I think for me, it didn't really, while I liked the approach strategically, I felt the execution fell a little flat, and I wasn't really sure what I was meant to do with it. So, I mean, marks for trying. I'd probably give it a 6 though.
Excellent. Chris, are you in agreement?
I'd probably be a little bit, I'd be in agreement that I was kind of like searching for somewhere else to go and couldn't find it. I mean, I think Earth Hour is, you know, an amazing piece of marketing over the last sort of decade. You know, it's an open source movement. They openly encourage brands to participate in it, and I think this is just one of those opportunities. Do I think that it's going to, you know, shock the world into reconsidering climate change and, you know, a debate around it? Not really. Do I think that utilising beer as a currency to leverage off, you know, it's an interesting kind of thought. It's a pretty powerful motivator. You know, I see they've got Tony Abbott at the end of it. You know, it'd be interesting kind of what Bob Hawke or some of these other kind of famous politicians might kind of think about it if beer's going to taste as shit as that in the future. But from that point of view, yeah, I'm probably more at about a 5.5 on that.
Excellent. So they're the first 3 ads that we're going to talk about. So I thought we might just take a little break from focusing so much on ads and talk a little bit more around some of the issues in the industry and some of the trends. And today we saw that Mars Bar had moved away from their quite iconic work, rest, play tagline, and they introduced the put some play in your day tagline. So I thought it could be good to chat about when a brand has built up this long history of a tagline that people know and people associate with the brand. Is there any danger of moving away from that? Hamish, what do you think about that one?
It's a good question. I think you can kind of see when a campaign is starting to run out of legs, just because creative executions they look a little thin, like they have literally run out of ideas and ways to execute it. You know, and with the amount of the number of sort of marketers that change roles and move companies, a lot of long-standing taglines or campaigns do end up getting axed just because, you know, the client wants to do something new, and in some cases I think it's warranted, and others maybe not so. But I think if you look at you know, some of the longest running taglines like "Just Do It," every execution I see of that still feels fresh despite having, you know, been 20 years old. So I think it depends on a case-by-case basis, and in the case of Mars, maybe it was time for a new angle. And I saw the execution of the janitor on stage. It was, you know, reasonably amusing, and I'd like to see where else they take it. I'm sure they'll find some interesting places to do that.
Chris, what are your thoughts on this? We obviously saw the Meat and Livestock Association do this at the start of the year with the Australia Day campaign. It wasn't a tagline they moved away from, but they sort of evolved the Sam Kekovich long-running lamb campaign to something a little bit different, but they incorporated him into that, and I think that was quite successful. But when you're moving away from a slogan to a new slogan, what do you think? What can the impact be on the brand?
Yeah, our agency is a huge believer in building enduring brand platforms. And I think that, you know, there's a lot of risk when you move away. Like, for many of these brands, tens to hundreds of millions of dollars have been spent kind of building an equity, and often, people make the flippant choice to move away, where I think that often you can reinvent within the same area. For us, one of our lead kind of clients is Grieve, and Don't Hold Back has been incredibly powerful in sort of reinventing that brand over the last 4 years, and I think consistency is key there. We've done a lot of work with the dairy industry, developing Legendary, which we think kind of unites that whole industry, and even Sean Cummins and Jason Ross developed You'll Have Every Little Piece of Victoria, which is kind of running over 20 years now for Victorian tourism. And I think yes, you need to find ways to constantly refresh it, but I think that there is an importance in consistency from a consumer point of view, and it kind of helps them sort of relate to brands as well. I think also, you can see great brands that have actually moved away and come back, and I think VB was one of those. I work with Jim and Cuz from a creative point of view, and previously at another agency, they worked on VB, bringing back Heart and Thirst, and it seems like it was the right decision to make at that time, and was at the start of a bit of a resurgence for that brand as well.
Excellent. So just moving on to another topic, the issue of paying for pictures came up in our last creative hangout when Christian Finn came from Core. He said that payment for pictures can generate goodwill amongst agencies and clients. So Chris, what do you think about this? Should clients be paying agencies to participate in a pitch?
Sure, I love it. It's fantastic. I'd like to see more of it. We're probably, quite lucky, and the more clients we deal with, I think they're opening that discussion as well. We're working on 3 pitches at the moment, and all of them are paid, at varying levels. And I think from that point of view, they have large expectations for the amount of work that will actually be done. And I think that, having some respect for the agencies and the effort that they're actually going to put into it is a good thing. Because, a lot of agencies put hundreds of thousands of dollars into huge pitches. So from that point of view, I think some level of compensation for that is great. And I think it is a good signifier of a client that respects that.
Excellent. Hamish, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree with all those comments. I think there is a lot of effort that goes into pitching, and especially, and sometimes agencies will decide to pitch or not, depending on how many other agencies are being asked to pitch. Sometimes it can be a bit of a lottery, but if you're being compensated, then you know that the client is sort of taking every agency's submission quite seriously. So I think that's an indicator that it's a piece of business that's worth going for, and also a client that respects that the agency is a genuine creative partner for the future. So yeah, I agree with all that.
Excellent. So I thought we'd just go back to some of the other campaigns we're going to chat about, and the last 2 are from Leah Burnett Sydney, and it's for Samsung, and it's promoting Samsung's virtual reality technology. So they launched the product by showcasing how it could make you feel like you're diving with sharks, and they did this for people who were living in Alice Springs, which was a bit unusual. And then they followed it up with a video showing how the VR device could be used to link up families for important events such as the birth of a child. So that one was, again, got quite a lot of coverage from media. So this is, a tech brand trying to highlight how its own technology can be used and, is related to people's lives, as opposed to some of the other campaigns we were talking about previously, which were brands wanting to use technology to sort of market a brand message and talk about different issues in society. So how does the marketing sort of differ for agencies when they get something like this Samsung device compared to when they're looking at a brand and want to bring technology into it? Hamish?
I think the challenge with Samsung was to show people the potential of the technology without actually. It's hard to experience it if you don't experience something personally. So I guess looking at the case study videos, it's another example of a film stunt where you don't actually have to take part to get the effect of the product. So I think it's very smart, and there's a bit of dramatic license. They've chosen some interesting scenarios. So yeah, look, in both cases, I think they've done a pretty good job. Even though it's probably quite clear, or maybe it's not, that that phone or that VR gear by itself isn't going to give you the same effect as the Shark or the delivery. So you need a lot more kit for that to happen. But it's more the potential of the technology rather than asking someone to go out and buy it tomorrow based on that demonstration, I think.
Chris, what were your thoughts on these two particular ads?
I think with a lot of that technology, it's tightly aligned to what they're trying to stand for as a brand, both kind of locally and globally. I think Shark has less relevance for a lot of people. They either live in Alice Springs or their chance of diving with sharks, but I think it's a great dramatization. And I think the birth one is pretty powerful. There are a lot of mums out there, a lot of dads out there. Pretty much we were all born at some stage, so we can all kind of draw some sort of relevance to it. And I think it's close to 10 million plus views. It's kind of escalated rapidly globally, and I think it's a pretty powerful kind of demonstration as well. One of the things about both of these, which are videos, and even going back to those other ideas as well, is a lot of them, and technology is playing a key role, but at the same time, they're largely videos that are seeded online to generate a number of views and shares. They're not that you participate. I mean, you can go all the way back to like 2005 and Big Ad, which was designed in exactly the same way. Birth at 6 minutes is a long form version of the same. But I think that all of them, and I think one of the great opportunities with technology is to find ways to allow people to participate in the idea, participate in the brand. And all of these still kind of miss a trick a little bit on that.
Do you think, Chris, that these videos would make people want to go out and get their hands on this Samsung device and mess around with it?
Oh, well, I don't necessarily think so. I mean, if you go back to when people were first having email was pretty useless unless you could kind of connect it with someone else or some content. And the connection of those nodes, same with mobile phones as well, are all kind of are linked. I mean, the product sells at $249. It's not a crazy price point to enter on. But at the same time, I wouldn't think they have a lot of huge expectations of volumes of sales at the same time. But I think it does a greater job at a brand level for sort of proving out what Samsung is all about from a business and what they're trying to do in connecting people and removing geography and distance as a barrier.
And what would you give them both out of 10?
If I continue on this, I'd probably give Shark sort of 6.5. I'd probably give the birth one 9.
Hamish?
I'd give Shark. I like sharks. I'd give it 7, and birth I'd probably give 8.
Excellent. So they're all the ads we're going to talk about, but I thought we'd have a few quick last questions before I let you two go. So putting aside both your own agencies, which agencies in the Australian market are standing out to you as producing good work and sort of lifting the bar on the industry?
It's interesting. Like normally, there's a clear front runner. If you asked me that question 4 years ago, it would be Cummins, Melbourne, the whole way. But I think the playing field's a lot more even at the moment. There's bits and pieces of good work coming out of 1 or 2 pieces per agency per year. So I couldn't say that there's a clear agency that's really standing out personally.
Chris, what are your thoughts?
An agency that kind of started about where at the same time we did, which I've always been very interested. I used to work in part of WPP. They were one of the agencies launched in Australia was VML. I know Aidan and some of the team members there, and I think they do some pretty interesting work. They're a lot less interested in comms per se. They've got a lot more of a focus on product development. And, I think if you look at a digital agency, and I know there was a bunch of talk about digital agencies aren't going to exist in 2 years. I think if you think your digital agency is doing banners and buttons, you're probably right. I think more using technology to develop new products or transform businesses, I think that there will always be a role for those sorts of businesses. And I think that, they are probably a little bit more advanced and meaningful in those areas than others.
Excellent. And Fairmouth has also just picked up the Macca's digital social account, so it'll be interesting to see what sort of work they do for them. And so as our final question, what work have you guys recently wished you'd worked on? Something you'd really love to have been part of? Hamish?
It's two pieces of work for me. One was probably 6 months old, but it's the Penny the Pirate piece from Saatchi's. Just really love the thinking behind it and the execution. And the more recent piece of work is the Optus Ricky Gervais online. Yeah. I don't know how much the agency actually had in writing it. You know, it seems like they just let him go. But I love that the client was happy for him to say something like, "I don't even know what this is." You know, like I think it was really brave. It's good to see an Australian client really taking a risk like that, and it's paid off massively. So those are two pieces that I wish I'd worked on.
Campaigns.
Yeah.
Chris, which ones are you wishing you got to do?
Probably less at a campaign level. You talked about product development, but I kind of like things that are trying to tackle real world problems. And you know, talking at the product development point of view, I really like the Volvo Life Paint. Well, probably product as opposed to campaign that's going on at the moment. I mean, at a Volvo level, I think it ties in pretty nicely with some of their brand values around safety. It ties in with some of their new product innovation on safety, and you know, the ability and what it does when you actually add it to an individual or their bike, and how they light up and, you know, protect a lot of people in those areas from riding bicycles, I think is a pretty amazing invention, and I think has great potential, whether on cycles or bicycles or whatever else it might be.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Hamish, and thank you, Chris, for coming in today. That's all we have time for. So thank you for watching, and I hope you tune in for our next Mumbo review in about 2 weeks. Thank you.
Thanks.
Cheers. Thank you.